It is a good Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, technically, here at the Voice of College Football Studios, bright and early on a Sunday, bright and early for me, still adjusting to hours outside of ESPN for me and for what I've lived with for most of my life here. So bright and early for me, the Voice of College Football. We welcome you in on a Sunday. Thought this would be a good time to talk college football with you. Take your comments, your questions, your debate topics in the live chat, and your calls as well before the NFL playoff games this afternoon, because many of you care, many of you watch, many of you are locked in on that, many of you are not. I would love to have an NFL channel, by the way. If there were two of me, I could split me in half. I would do an NFL channel, and I would do that up big. But it may just have to be enough that I'm the voice of college football. We are the voice of college football. Dual meaning, as I've explained to many people many times when asked about the voice of college football, because many people have dubbed me the voice of college football. And for that, I thank you. I did not come up with that name. Many of you came up with that name, various factions chiming in over the years. And it struck me one day, bam, that particular person is the umpteenth person that has said that about me. So, man, that's a great name. Ran it by some friends, and they said, absolutely, run with that, the voice of college football. Then the more that I used that term, the more I thought, we've got a platform here where I've got a voice, you all have a voice, and we encourage that here. You hear that when people call me and I leave them on the line for 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe more. That aggravates some of you. That actually aggravates me sometimes, so I need to do a little bit better about monitoring and limiting repeated phone calls that go on and on and on and on and on and on, don't get anywhere. So I've got to be thinking about you listening. Yes, but I don't think there's a platform around that gives as many voices to college football at length that we do here. So the voice of college football is myself. It is you chiming in your comments on the live chat, comments to the videos, and of course the call-in shows as well. And of course, the voice I give to many contributors out there, writers from 247 Sports, Rivals, Bleacher Report in the past, SB Nation, and elsewhere. So here we are, MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. And when I refer to this as bright and early in the morning, I am in the midst of trying to adjust my sleeping pattern, trying to adjust and trying to change a pattern that's been built up over years and years and years and years. So I've always been a late night person, From the time I was 8 or 9 years old and got into sports and got into late night TV, my mom would have to drag me to bed, and I would still stay up late at night in my bed with the radio huddled up next to my ear to listen to the Cleveland Indians games on the West Coast at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, when I had to get up at 6:30 in the morning to go to school. I've always been a late night person. Of course, that didn't change in high school or college. Of course, the lives that most of us led, we love to stay up late for various reasons. Then I got into television, and I've had a television career for 30 years, almost 30 years. Let's not age me too much. It was cut short at 29 years, or I cut it short at 29 years. So my broadcasting / management career in broadcasting for 29 years, late nights. Except for the first job I had, actually. The first job I had, I was the news anchor for a local, small local TV station, radio station in central Ohio. And I anchored the 6 o'clock news. And except for going out to some news stories at night, at times, and also serving as the play-by-play voice for Ashland University football and high school football and basketball and various other events, I had a regular 8 to 6, 9 to 6 job. But ever since then, whether it was in Mississippi when I was sports director at a CBS station there, or, oh my goodness, for a year and a half as an assistant manager at Walmart. Ugh, God bless you, Walmart, but that was the worst job I've ever had. Then going to ESPN and being there for 19 years and never having anybody that cared enough to get me off the night shift, although I asked about 47 times. I was stuck on the night shift for 19 years at ESPN. So, yeah, I'm trying to readjust my life, and it's difficult to do because I like to stay up late, but I don't think it's good for me, and I don't think it's good for anybody, really, long term. Doctors have told me that. Doctors have probably told some of you that as well. So I love to stay up late, but I think there's definitely a reason why God raises the sun at a certain time of the day and he sets it at a certain time of the day. You're supposed to sleep when it's dark and you're supposed to be up when it's light. That all to say, this is still early for me, and my mouth and my mind don't work together very well the earlier the live stream. But I wanted to jump on here to talk to you before the NFL playoff games, and so here we are. I placed in the title off-season topics, and so we will get to those in regards to what I have planned, but I want to hear from you. I want your requests on off-season topics. Keep in mind that if you leave those requests in the live chat, I will not see them. I'm going to go through the live chat, but I will not take note of them because that's all I'd be doing is sitting here writing down, and it's going to be lost in the ether. Yes, the video is going to post. I could go through a live chat, but that would be a complete waste of my time to go through a live chat from yesterday and the day before and the day before. If you have any requests for off-season content that I don't already do, so keep in mind that I'm going to go through a list that is exhaustive. Am I going to get to all of it? Maybe not. Probably not, but I will get to most of it. I'd like to get to a lot of topics and go to a lot of series that I've produced in the past that I'm discovering that the more I do this, and this is a good thing because we're up over 24,000 subscribers and we're up over 45,000 subscribers if you put all our channels together with our guy Chris on SD1 Sports. All our Voice of College Football channels put together are around 45,000 subscribers that most of you have not seen because I get asked about my playoff options and my playoff approach and my playoff system and proposal all the time. I produced those videos a few different times through the years, but it's been a while. And fortunately, most of you have just been watching me for weeks or months or a couple of years, not 10 years. So it's great to have all of you. It does my heart good to get in the live chat and see people that I've never seen before. So welcome aboard. And if I see a new name, this used to be standard practice. When I was adding 100 subs a month, this used to be standard practice that I would welcome each new person that I see. But I would drive you guys crazy if I welcomed every individual that I see. And now it's pretty common practice. And so I don't even think about it sometimes. But I would like to give all of you a big, big welcome when you join here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. I am always completely honest, completely transparent about what we do. We have 11 other channels: Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Miami, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State, Texas, Oregon, USC, and the SEC. So if you search Voice of College Football SEC, you'll find our channel. Voice of College Football Miami, Voice of College Football Nebraska. I would ask, and I am asking, that if you are a fan of any one of those teams or any teams within the SEC, see, the mind and the mouth don't work this early in the morning for me. We will get there. That you would go to those channels and subscribe, especially those channels that are at less than 1,000 subs. We need to get to all those channels up to 1,000 subs. So please subscribe there if you are a fan of any of those teams, or you just want to support the channel. If you just want to support the channel, then be a subscriber everywhere. And if you don't want to be driven crazy by notifications, then turn them off. but it would be phenomenal if you subscribe to all the channels. We need to get those channels to 1,000 subs, and then, of course, way beyond that. I am happy and blessed and pleased and thankful and grateful to you that I've got 24,000 subs. Absolutely. I want to be at 250,000 subs, 500,000 subs. And many of you can see that vision. You can see how we can do that all together. I'm going to quote somebody that I watched on YouTube recently, not a college football person, not anyone. Somebody that all of you would know, no question about that, but together. All right, we will get to off-season topics. Let me remind you that these videos will be watched by typically the live streams 1,000 to 5,000 people, 1 to 5,000 people, depending. Now, during the college football playoffs, we had as many as 19,000 views on one of our live streams. That was awesome. And we would like to do that on a regular basis. Man, there's a political podcast that I see that my son watches. I don't watch it very often, even though I think it's excellent. I just don't have time to watch it. Don't think about it. But there's a political podcast, and don't ask me who it is because I don't know the person's name. I know there are a couple guys that look like surfer dudes that wear beanies. That's all I could tell you. I think one of their name is Tim, I believe. So anyway, what catches my eye is that I subscribe to their channel. I think I must because I won't get the notifications, but I'll jump on YouTube and I'll see that they're live, and I'll click on the live stream for 30 seconds just again because it's always interesting, but I just don't have time to watch and listen and move on to other things. But notice that they'll have 47,000 people watching, listening to their podcast, 47,000 people at once. Not the video will eventually get 500,000 or 1 million views, but in the moment, 47,000. Well, of course, there are many more people that are interested in politics than college football. I get that. College football is a very significant niche. Like if we were doing Nebraska football, then that would be a very specific niche. College football is still a significant niche, but there are many more people interested in music, politics, film, those sorts of things that have the opportunity for more subscribers and more views than talking about college football, especially in the middle of May like we do. But I love college football. I love talking about college football. I think it's a fascinating subject, and I love watching college football. I guess it's a tie for first place among a few other things, but college football, we'll say, and therefore I chose college football. When I started this channel, which actually there was another channel called On the Mark. When I started that channel, I talked about whatever was on my mind in sports, nothing else but sports. And then I quickly determined within a few weeks, I can't talk about baseball one day, talk about college football the next 3 days, go back and talk about baseball the next day, then talk about the NFL for 3 days, then talk about college football. No. I would have to be a big-time personality to do that. All right. I will continue to ramble, I believe. We are going to take your calls, and I'm going to run through off-season topics. That's why we're here, to talk about off-season topics. But keep in mind, anytime I title a show, that doesn't mean that's all we have to talk about, that I am mandating that we talk only about that topic. I just want to give a little bit more direction to the shows rather than just get on here and say, I'm taking your calls, let's talk college football. So I want to go through the news headlines first to make sure that we're not missing anything, because I haven't looked at the news for probably at least 12 hours. So sometimes especially with these athletes declaring for the transfer portal, and this time of year, the NFL draft by the hour, we need to stay on top of that. I have started a series. You're going to see some of these videos on the main channel right here. You're going to see some of these videos on some of the sub-channels, the SEC in particular, where I'm running down the top prospects for 2021 that have yet to sign. That includes, of course, Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, Alabama prospect JT Tui Mulawau out of Washington, the state of Washington. And also we looked at LJ Johnson out of Cypress, Texas, running back, top 5 running back who was considering most notably Texas A&M and Texas. I believe also all I have to do is look at the helmet display because that's why I set it up that way. Texas, LSU, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M for LJ Johnson. So recruiting is still in play, of course, with National Signing Day, the second National Signing Day coming up on Wednesday, February 3rd. So I'm running a series, just started it yesterday, in which I will do a profile on the top recruits who have yet to sign and where they are leaning. And of course, to get your comments, if you've seen that particular player on the field live, if you have any thoughts, I went through scouting reports, I went through their rankings and their declared commitment list, interest list. All right, let's get to the news. And then I'm going to check out your comments. Of course, the phone lines are always open at 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. I hope you guys are going to lock in on the videos that I posted over the last week and more to come, looking at teams across the board and who's leaving early for the NFL, who's coming back, how the recruiting process looks for 2021 and 22, and also the transfer portal. We posted videos on Texas A&M, Nebraska, Alabama, Kentucky, Florida, Ohio State, of course, Michigan, Nebraska. Did I say them? Nebraska. I'll say it again. Nebraska, Miami, and many others. Georgia, Oklahoma. Any news we're missing? I would love to have a pipeline of news information, college football news information piped in to me instead of searching the internet for news, because many times I miss stories. A decent player will transfer. When a superstar transfers like Justin Fields, everybody knows about it. That's difficult to miss. But even when Jared Garantano transfers from Tennessee to Washington State, I would like to know about it so I can choose to do a video or discuss it on here. I need a pipeline of news. I would ask that if anyone knows of any sites that are great to track for news, college football news, especially in a particular conference, the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, all the conferences, any one of them. I know myself better than to ask you to tell me, because then I'm not going to track those. I just need one source to pipe me to just be a pipeline of information, news information. All right. So these are the ESPN top headlines for college football today. Really, there's only one new item here that I don't know about. Marshall set to hire Tide's Huff as coach. We'll look at that in just a second. The rest of it, pretty much old news. Travis Etienne enters the NFL draft, of course. Wan'Dale Robinson transfers from Nebraska to Kentucky. We've got a video posted on that. Maryland is to settle with McNair family for $3.5 million. Mac Jones, others from the Alabama Crimson Tide declare for the NFL draft. We have covered that. And WAC expansion. The glasses are broken and the contacts are not in. WAC expansion could bring back football to FCS. Duke Athletic Director White to step down following 13 years. And we saw just the other day that David Cutcliffe at Duke will give up play calling duties, and that's in his wheelhouse, but maybe just too much on his plate at his age. Marshall is expected to hire Alabama associate head coach, running backs coach Charles Huff as its new head coach, pending approval by the university's board of Governors Monday. Sources confirmed to ESPN. Huff, 37, regarded as one of the top recruiters in college football. He also helped develop running backs Saquon Barkley at Penn State and Najee Harris at Alabama. Huff has never been a head football coach at the college level. Charles Huff, new head coach at Marshall. Another of the Alabama staff moving on elsewhere to get their head coaching career started. All right, let me get to some of your comments, and then we're going to go through off-season topics. And, of course, the phone lines are always open for your college football comments and questions at 860-325-3687. But before we do that, again, like the video. Why that is so important to YouTube, I have no idea, but it is. They have made it important to like the video. If a video gets 10,000 views and 10 likes versus another video that gets 20,000 views, twice as many views, but 10,000 likes, they push the video that gets the likes. And we need these videos to get pushed by YouTube in the suggested videos section. We need to get them pushed into the traffic for this to blow up. All right. Also need you to share these videos out on social media. Would like you to do that as well. Share the videos on social media. All right. You ready for this? Off-season topics. Hopefully I can find where I've got these listed. I believe that's the document. Maybe not. Oh. Content. MarkRogersTV content. Punch list, schedule, merchandise. Oh boy, don't want to go through that. Patreon, content ideas. Here we go. Instant news analysis, viewer reaction videos, 1 to 130 rankings, meaning not just top 25 rankings, but top 1 to 130 rankings, the entirety of college football ranked 1 to 130. We could do a ranking for 2020, the final for 2020, which, of course, I've released my top 25. That actually makes sense. This would be my top 130. That actually makes sense. Or a way too early top 130 for next year. So rank everybody. Of course, tracking the transfer portal and providing videos on that. Spring previews, NFL draft early entry deadline. Of course, we do that already. NFL draft previews, NFL draft combine. We do all that. Conference rankings. Okay. Tough to rank the conferences this year. They didn't play each other except for a handful of games, but we could still rank the conferences. Recruiting versus results. I've done that with a few different matchups. Clemson, Florida State, Ohio State, Michigan. I did something like that through the SEC, looking at the recruiting rankings versus the results. Who is overachieving, who's underachieving. Preseason versus postseason rankings. Meaning, okay, these are the preseason rankings over the last 10 years. These are the postseason rankings over the last 10 years. Which schools are, again, overachieving, playing beyond expectations of their preseason rankings, and which schools are not meeting the expectations of their preseason rankings. 2021 targets, we already talked about that. Best games of 2020. Best games of 2020. Marshall, BYU. Oh, my goodness. Maybe the Alabama-Ole Miss game, Alabama-Florida. Who else? Best games of 2020. Texas-Oklahoma State was a good game. All right. Affiliate videos based on my favorite products. Bowl projections. Transfer portal, of course. Keep list of hot coaching candidates. Final standings versus my predictions. I released that video about a week ago. So you get to see my predictions put on the line. So I'm always accountable for my predictions. They're all on videotape or they are time-stamped somewhere for the last 2 football seasons on Patreon. Before that, you can find any of my predictions here. So I cannot run from my prediction record. I can't make it up. It's all right here. All-time program rankings. LSU number 1, Texas number 2, USC number 3, Oklahoma number 4, Notre Dame number 5, Alabama number 6. Coming up with a formula, and those are not my rankings. I intentionally put different teams at the top just to possibly get a response. Program rankings, all-time program rankings. So we would count national championships, which I hate to a certain extent because they're skewed. Record, winning percentage, conference championships, top 5 finishes, top 10 finishes, ranked finishes. Okay. Schedule rankings. I always love doing schedule rankings. Recruiting profiles. We're in the process of doing those. Hope that all of you are enjoying those. Conference rankings, position rankings. So I've done this in the past off seasons. I have ranked the top 10 at every position in college football. I have also ranked the top 5 at every position in every conference. ACC top 5 quarterbacks, ACC top 5 running backs, ACC top 5 offensive linemen. Although that really shorts the offensive linemen for sure. You've got 5 starting offensive linemen on every team. You only have 1 quarterback. So you've got 14 teams in the ACC. You've got 70 starting offensive linemen in the ACC, and you only have 14 starting quarterbacks. And we do a top 5 for each position. You have to be amazing to be on the top 5 offensive linemen. You have to be good, decent, to be the top 5 in the top 5 list for quarterbacks. Coaches rankings. We've done those in the past. Our top 10 nationally and our rankings 1 through 12 or 14 in the particular conference. Coaches rankings. Too early, way too early, top 25. Working on that right now. Way too early, top 25. My schedule fix. So I've released over the last few days what an 8-team playoff would look like during the college football playoff era. Please check out the video. It's about 3 days old. What an 8-team playoff would looked like during the college football playoff era for the last 7 seasons since 2014. I used 2 different methods. In one, I simply took the selection committee's rankings at the end of the regular season and said, here they are. This is what the selection committee would have chosen for an 8-team playoff. I do not propose that in any such way. If you have listened to me at all, you know that I am not an advocate of 13 people selecting who goes to the playoff. All right. The other proposal was more of my system, even though I've yet to unveil, at least in recent years, in the last couple of years, I've yet to unveil my system, which would be 5 conference champions, 2 wild cards, and in a sense, 3 wild cards, but group of 5 representation in one spot. But I've got a couple other formulas I would like to unveil. So I've yet to release my format, but I just wanted everyone to get a look at what an 8-team playoff would have looked like for the last 7 seasons during the playoff era. I'm also going to release a video series where I have a 16-team playoff, what that would look like during the playoff era. And I could go back before that if people are going to watch the videos. If it's a waste of time to produce the videos, then I will stop. But if you guys are interested, I will produce 16-team playoff looks in the past. Then I'm going to release a video with my 8-team playoff and my 16-team playoff. But to do that, we have to fix scheduling. So everybody is proposing playoff formats, but it's truly going to work by adjusting, tweaking, revamping the schedules. The schedules are screwed up in college football beyond belief. The schedules are not fair in any such way. There needs to be equity brought to college football scheduling, and the scheduling needs to be taken out of the hands of the schools. Why the schools are scheduling their own games is idiotic, is moronic, beyond belief. There needs to be a scheduling system. I have devised one. I've released videos in previous years, but most of you have not seen them, so I'm going to re-release them and possibly tweak the system. Possibly, maybe not. I think it's pretty much not a perfect system, but the best system I've heard of. Both conference scheduling and non-conference scheduling. And then we can release the 8-team and 16-team playoff format. All right. Go through old college football magazines. It was just a thought one day, and it got put on a list. This list is like 8,000 deep. Best games of the year, conference and non-conference games. So I think I'll forget about 2020. Nobody cares anymore about talking about the best games of 2020. Maybe we could. Maybe we could. We could get on here during a live stream and do that. That could be a topic for tomorrow, possibly. I had a thought. But looking forward, I am certainly going to preview and list the top matchups for 2021. Those videos will be coming out in the next couple months. Top games of 2021 in each conference and top games of 21 nationally. All right. Hypothetical matchups. LSU has never played Michigan. LSU has never played Michigan. Who are the teams, the programs we would like to see play each other? The New Year's Six Bulls had the perfect opportunity to set up 2 excellent games a couple years ago, but they chose otherwise. They chose to match Michigan and Florida for a third time in 2.5 years in the Peach Bowl and have LSU play Central Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. What ended up happening was we had one good game and one lousy game, but we could have had 2 excellent matchups. We could have had Florida and Central Florida play, and we could have had Michigan and LSU, who have never been on a football field together. We could have had them play. Somebody just called in. Sorry, I might have screwed that up. I also forgot to, I should have not included the mic today. Oh, man, we could have a college football fantasy league. Can you imagine that? College football fantasy league. Does anybody want to organize that for me? Because I can't do it. A college football fantasy league. That would be phenomenal. Here we go. Let's see if I don't screw this up. Hey, it's MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports 4. How are you doing?
Hey, McD, I'm doing well. What's going on?
I'm doing good. I want to talk about a few things. The first thing I want to talk about is Maryland's new offensive coordinator. I don't know if you caught this or not, but after 2 years of service, Mike Locksley decided to fire Sky Montgomery, our offensive coordinator, and he is getting replaced by Dan Enos.
Oh, boy. I did not see that.
I'm not.
So Scotty Montgomery, the former head coach at Tulsa, gone and replaced by Dan Enos, East Carolina. Scotty Montgomery. Okay, I'm getting him mixed up with Phil Montgomery or anyway. Scotty Montgomery. Yes, East Carolina. My bad. I've actually interviewed the guy a couple times. And I still screwed that up. Okay, yes, thank you very much. Scotty Montgomery, former East Carolina head coach, Maryland offensive coordinator, thinking of the Maryland offensive production over the last couple of years, fired. Dan Enos, Alabama, Arkansas, Miami, most recently hired. Okay, what do you think about that?
Well, I think Mike Locksley, after this season, this weird season, we only got 5 games in. We went 2-3. There were 2 wins against a Minnesota Penn State team, which blew us out last season, 2019 and 2020. We beat them. Granted, you could say those teams took a big step back, but I think what it came down to was execution and inconsistencies on the offense. I think that's why the move was made. But last I heard from Dan Enos, he was Cincinnati's running back coach. Miami fans didn't like him, and I watched Miami. To me, I don't think they ever really had a quarterback. We have a legitimate quarterback in Maryland and Tola Tagovailoa. So basically, we'll see how it goes. But hopefully, Mike Locksley's making the right move here, because I'm not completely. I don't think I would not have made the move if I was in Mike Locksley's shoes. Let's put it that way.
You make a good point about the Miami football situation, because, yes, Miami fans were not pleased with Dan Enos. I will say this. Their red zone conversion rate and their third down conversion rate with him was bottom 5 to 10 in the nation. But your point is very true. Their quarterback play under Enos, and I don't know how much he had to do with this, but I don't think he had a whole lot to do with it. It was lack of development of quarterbacks, or just not selecting the right quarterback, and also not having the talent at the position. Malik Rozier was not a Power 5 quarterback. He should not have been a starting quarterback for anybody in the Power 5. And N'Kosi Perry has talent, but he was just way too young, inexperienced, and underdeveloped. And those are the 2 quarterbacks that played under Enos.
Yeah, I don't think all of it was Dan Enos' fault down there in Miami, but that's the last I remember of him. So hopefully Mike Locksley knows what he's doing. I think Maryland is. I'm going to tell you a few things to write down, Mark, here in a minute. For some early predictions for 2021. But I think Maryland has a legit shot to finish second in the Big Ten East. So we'll see how it goes.
I agree.
Okay. Because I don't know if that was crazy enough or not to say. Personally, I think we finished third, because I think Indiana's better. But I do think we have a legit shot.
You have a shot. Yes, you have a legit shot. I totally agree with that statement. I think we are seeing some other schools in transition, and Penn State is a big wild card. They could return to be the Penn State that we've seen over the last 5 years, or they could be in decline to a certain extent and having a transition. They are bringing back all their skill position players that matter at Penn State.
I do think Penn State could do well, though. That is the one thing I'm thinking of, because they kind of turned it around that second half of the season. They played all 9 games, so and they kind of turned it around. So I think they could.
If they started playing tomorrow, I would pick Penn State second, but I would most likely pick Maryland third, or we've got Indiana. I'm not considering Indiana. I would pick you fourth, probably, if they started playing tomorrow.
I would probably say third, but I'm a Maryland fan, so of course I'm homing a little bit. But a few things, Mark. One, Michigan will go 4-8 in 2021, and it will be terrible. It will just be terrible. I think Michigan. I think the only team in the Big Ten East I would say they'll beat is Rutgers, and I think Michigan State's going to be better than them, and of course everybody else, the top four, are going to be better.
Well, I am far away from making predictions for 2021, but if I had to spitball one right now, I'd say 7-5.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I just looked at their schedule, which Big Ten's the only ones that have their schedule fully done already, and I mean, just looking at it from the surface, I personally think it's a complete mess at Michigan right now, personally.
It certainly was last football season, and they ascended under Harbaugh for 2 years. They plateaued. They started to slip a little bit, but they were still good. And then, last season, and I think last season there were, especially in the Big Ten and the Pac-12, certain conditions because of the pandemic, and there was the late start and the back and forth. But most good teams, really all good teams, were able to navigate that and still put together the type season that you would have expected them to put together. Even Wisconsin only went 4-3, but they lost three close games to good teams. And they went out there and won a bowl game, and they were still a Wisconsin football team that you would recognize. Michigan just fell off the rails. They just ran off the rails. They were awful. So it will be intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of leads to what I said about Penn State. I think Penn State, a lot of their key position players were gone after 2019. They just had to figure it out in the first half. That's why I do think they're such a big wild card, because I personally think Penn State could go 11-1 with a loss to Ohio State next year. That's how I think they could how good I think they could really be. But I also think they could be 500. But obviously, we'll see. I think it's gonna be fun in the Big Ten East, and then I also think they're gonna play all 12 games. So we'll see. But one of the off-season topics, Mark, is obviously conference realignment. I see you have my comment right in front of you.
Oh yeah. I've done that in the past. I will dust that off and attack that again. I love the topic of conference realignment. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I have an interesting conference realignment. I'm not going to share that with you right now, but I do think the 18 playoff is coming. I think you got to have it. But I have a way with my conference realignment to make sure that there's no 3 teams in the SEC. At max, only 2 teams in the SEC can get in my whole conference realignment thing.
Okay. So who's going to be blessed to hear about this conference realignment plan?
Repeat your question, kind of cut out there a little bit.
McD, who's going to be so blessed to hear about your conference realignment plan?
The Pac-12, the group of 5.
No, who's going to be so blessed to hear about it? Like viewers, listeners, who's this going to be unveiled to?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Oh, I thought you said you came up with a plan. You're not going to tell us right now. So this is going to be unveiled at some future date or something?
Well, I was going to start a blog, and I was going to unveil it there.
There we go.
So.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah, but I think everybody will like it. I think everybody will like it.
Okay, we'll be looking forward to that. Anything else today?
Nah, that's all I have for you, Mark.
All right, McD. Appreciate it. All right. Conference realignment. I'm sure that's on my list here somewhere. I've done that in the past. I believe I came up with a pretty good plan where I brought the Big East back into play. And so I went with 6 conferences, 6 major conferences I built a new conference, 12 teams per conference. So we've got standardization across the board. So 72 teams in the Power 5. All right. Way too early top 25. Schedule fix. Love the schedule fix. That's one of my pet projects. That's one of my babies right there. Again, early morning. All right. Best games, as we mentioned, best matchups in each conference. Non-conference games and conference games. We'll do those. Man, I got a lot of work to do. College Football Fantasy League. Who else is excited about that? Somebody approached me last year about doing a College Football Fantasy League, and I said, go to it. And I don't know where the communication broke down, if they just failed to go to it. I don't have time, and I don't have the patience. I basically just don't have the time. The rest of the channel would suffer if I was like trying to keep track of a College Football Fantasy League. But if somebody else would love to do that for me, and we could all do one here, that would be phenomenal. I would love that. Hypothetical matchups. I was just outlining when McD called that in 2018, the New Year's Six Bulls had the opportunity to match up LSU and Michigan for the first time ever. LSU and Michigan have never met in football. That's a tragedy. I'm overstating that just slightly, but in a college football way, it's a tragedy. Okay. And they would have played LSU, Michigan, and Florida, UCF. But what did they do? They matched up UCF and LSU. Okay, that's fine. But Florida and Michigan playing for a third time in 2.5 years. They had already played a bowl game 2 years prior, and they played the season opener the year before. So Michigan, Florida played at the conclusion of 2015 in the Citrus Bowl. They played at the beginning, the opener of 2017. Then they played at the end of 2018 in a bowl game. Instant news analysis. That's what we try to accomplish here every day. Respond to breaking news. Coach gets fired. Coach gets hired. A commit makes his declaration. Whatever the news is, we try to jump on here as soon as possible and respond to the breaking news. I will never be the person to break the news. Keep that in mind. It would be moronic for me to think that I would be like some kind of news hound and my one-person operation could out-hustle these major sites to deliver the news, the breaking of the news, the reporting of the news. That's stupid. I've had a few people mention that to me about breaking news. You should be on the forefront of breaking news and breaking the news yourself. Number one, I'm a person of one versus operations of hundreds. And then number two, once the news breaks, rarely does anybody care or identify who broke the news. This is not 1975 where it's taken, the note is taken of who broke the news. Because within 12 minutes, everybody knows the news anyway. Nobody knows who broke the news. They should be credited for breaking the news, but we don't care who broke the news. It's about what does the news mean. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Kevin, Dallas, Georgia. How you doing this morning, Mark?
Kevin, I'm doing well. What's going on?
Just wanted to chime in on two subjects brought up. One was in reference to conference realignment.
Yes.
And also as far as scheduling. As far as on the conference realignment topic, two things, two institutions, I should say, and I think it was brought up maybe several years ago, and I think it was brought up in a whisper, and that was Oklahoma and Texas possibly becoming a part of the SEC to form I guess, in a respect mega conference. I don't know which institution was a little bit reluctant to. I don't know whether it's more so the Texas part of it or whether I think Oklahoma may have been leaning more so toward it, but Texas, I think, may not have been because of A&M already being a part of the conference.
Well, this is at a point in which this was close to 10 years ago when Nebraska joined the Big Ten. Basically, the Big 12 almost disbanded, came very close to disbanding. Colorado left, Texas A&M and Missouri left, Nebraska left. And there was a thought for a couple of years there, as you well know, that yes, that there would be mega super conferences of 16 teams eventually form. But we're here a decade later, and that has yet to happen.
And along those lines, who would it benefit the least of those two schools? And I think at that time, Mark, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it more so maybe Texas falling in line of a Notre Dame as in having their own network, own TV contract, and by that being the case, not wanting to share those funds as far as with the other schools in the conference?
Yes, the rest of the Big 12 is not happy with Texas. And it's one of the reasons why Nebraska actually left the conference, is that they thought that the Big 12 favored Texas and made a lot of decisions to favor Texas. And to your point, Texas signed an agreement with ESPN and launched its own network, where the rest of the Big 12 at that point, and the Big 12 has some type of network that nobody gets. I don't know what the situation is there, but they have some type of online network as everybody else does, but they don't have a over the air cable network like right now everybody else does. And yes, so Texas and ESPN got together and launched a network. So is the question basically, who would it benefit or not benefit for Texas and Oklahoma to join the SEC?
Yes, but I feel it would be a win-win on everyone's part. But it just seemed like at that particular time, it seemed like the reluctance would have been a matter of admitting Texas in because of, hey, having that contract. But then when you look at the remainder of the conference, you have Florida having a reluctance that they wouldn't want Florida State in because of, hey, having that same imprint. And then as far as South Carolina not wanting Clemson in because of that same imprint, as far as those teams coming to the SEC.
Okay, so you're going to expand this out to like a 16 team. So you're going to bring in Florida State, Clemson, Oklahoma, and Texas for a 16-team league.
I would, but the reluctance as far as for those institutions such as a Florida and a South Carolina, they wouldn't want Florida State or Clemson in because, hey, it's going to affect their imprint.
Okay, so the issue I see is that this would have to be done elsewhere around the country, or else you've got a 16-team SEC that's just a super conference, because basically you've taken the best conference in college football anyway, and you've added Texas and Oklahoma and Clemson and Florida State. So you've added two of the top 5 or 6 programs in the country, Clemson and Oklahoma, and you've added 2 potential giants that have been giants in the past, Texas and Florida State. So you've taken the best conference in college football, you've put it on steroids, and it's just going to dominate everything. And the only team really that could challenge any of those teams is Ohio State. And they might even suffer in recruiting, probably would, because everybody would flock to that conference, the SEC, and you might as well shut down college football. First of all, the Big 12's gone. The Big 12's done. They've lost Texas and Oklahoma, their 2 best programs. So they either become a group of 5 conference or they just disband. So you'd have to fix the other conferences in some way. And I don't know how you would do that. If you lose Clemson and Florida State out of the ACC, I don't know who they could possibly attract to make up for those losses. So college football would be over. They're basically like playing their own championship, the SEC.
But Mark, let's be honest now. Wouldn't it be safe to say that?
Do you really want to watch that?
That the Big 12 has been done for a while.
Do you really want to watch that? The SEC with Clemson, Florida State, Texas, and Oklahoma, and then watch the Pac-12, the Big 12 would be done. That I don't even know, they would not exist. They just couldn't make any money. Nobody pay attention to them. Their best schools would be Oklahoma State and Iowa State and TCU. They'd be done. They're toast. The Big 10 couldn't compete. on the field, then the ACC minus Clemson and Florida State, they can't compete. So basically the SEC championship game would be the national championship game. And it just, like, the sport would kind of cease to exist. I just, why would anyone have any interest in that? Like, I would almost probably stop watching college football. I just don't know why I'd be watching.
Ideally, well, like I say, ideally, I wouldn't do that. I mean, that was just something that was proposed and also rebuffed years ago. The only schools that I would definitely at least go there with, Mark, honestly, would be Oklahoma, Texas, but then two other schools, which those two other schools I couldn't name you off the top of my head. But I always thought, I thought that it was put out there maybe at least a decade or so ago that it would be a matter of being, 4 16-team conferences. And it's just a matter of just when it was going to get done.
Well, that would be tremendous for 16. Well, see, this is the issue. The more we expand these conferences, the less legitimate the conference championship is and the less legitimate the schedule is. See, this is going in the opposite direction of what I'm proposing, which is scheduling equality. So we were talking about a playoff system a few minutes ago, and everybody's got a proposal. My proposal is only fully effective if there are scheduling changes. So, Kevin, I'm going to bring up a situation to you that happens every year, but this is the classic example. This is about 5 years ago in the SEC. I'm looking at schedules, and I noticed that, Alabama and LSU being the two best teams in the SEC Western Division, as you well know, they basically play the same schedule. They play each other. They play everybody in the division. So 6 of their games are exact. They're exactly the same. So they only have 2 games out of the 8 that they play in the SEC that are different. Okay, in that particular year, Alabama was playing Tennessee, who they play every year, and Kentucky. Those 2 teams the previous year went 1-7. They both went 1-7 in the SEC. Okay, LSU was scheduled to play Georgia and Florida. Both of those teams went 7-1 in the SEC the previous season. So how is it equitable or fair that Alabama plays 2 teams that are 2-14 in the SEC the previous season, and LSU has to play 2 teams that went 14-2 the previous season in the SEC, and those 2 teams are competing for a division championship? And I could point out those type of issues in every conference every year. That's not fair. That's not how you equitably compete for a championship. When you say these 2 teams have exactly the same schedule, except for you're going to go play Georgia and Florida, you're going to go play Kentucky and Tennessee. They're 2-14, they're 14-2, and go compete for a championship. That's not fair or equitable. That needs to be fixed. And I'm just pointing out one example. There's a zillion.
Well, along those lines, Mark, when it comes to that particular conference, which I'm familiar with, and I'll just use as far as my marriage as an example, and that is I've been married 7 years, and during that time, Georgia has played Alabama in the regular season once. Now, during that engagement period, let's go add 2 years, and in that 9-year period, they've only played each other twice during the regular season.
Yep.
So when it comes to the West, you'll find that they'll, as you stated, the 6 games are given. Then you have, for instance, Auburn will play a Georgia because that's their rival. You have an Alabama that'll play a Tennessee because that's their rival. Now, those other games, such as Kentucky or Vanderbilt, schools of that nature, they'll play those schools, say, maybe once every 7 to 8 years as far as flip-flopping. But blame that, as far as the SEC is concerned, Mark, blame it on the AD, because that's the AD's fault as far as that's concerned. I know that as far as Alabama's played Kentucky twice in the past 7 years. As far as LSU is concerned, playing Florida, I'm thinking at least twice during that period of time. And as far as Georgia is concerned, now as far as going into scheduling for the future, hey, Alabama playing, Florida and Gainesville. Alabama playing Miami as far as at a neutral site. So only thing I can say in reference to that, Mark, blame the ADs on that.
Well,
Because everyone has their own voices concerning scheduling.
There's two reasons I bring up that example. And again, there's a zillion examples of it. There's two reasons. Is number one, because people are bringing up a playoff, and I'm just letting them know that in my perspective, you can't fix the playoff without fixing the scheduling, because we're evaluating teams that have such different schedules. The other reason I brought it up is because you brought up expansion. So the further you expand these conferences, the worse the scheduling gets, because right now we've got 14 teams in the SEC. They play 8 conference games. Therefore, you're playing 8 of the other 13 teams. So you're missing 5 teams. You're not playing 5 teams in your own conference every year. And the more you expand it, the more you are not going to see more teams. And the less overlap there is in a schedule, the more inequity there is in a schedule. For example, in the Big 12, there's 10 teams in the Big 12. They play a 9-game conference schedule, so everybody plays everyone. So that is the perfect schedule. That is the perfect, purest determination of a conference championship, is that everybody played everyone. Everybody's got the same schedule. In the Pac-12, it's close to that, where you've got 11 other teams in the Pac-12 and you play 9 conference games, so they only miss 2 teams. But in the ACC and the SEC, it's the worst possible situation, and expansion would make it even worse.
Well, along those lines, Mark, when it comes to those last 2 conferences that you named, they're playing with the cards that they've been dealt. As far as the rule is, play X amount of conference games. After you play X amount of conference games, then you play Little Sisters of the Poor and directional universities. Now, the one thing, you can say many things that you can say in reference to the University of Alabama, but the one thing that Coach Saban has been a proponent of for years, and that is to play a 9/10 game conference schedule, in which that finally came to fruition due to a pandemic, playing a 10-game conference schedule this year. Now, my question to you is, would it be okay across the board for every conference, whether conferences remain the same or whether conferences become, quote, these mega conferences and play a 10-game regular schedule, a 10-game conference schedule, plus your postseason, as in your conference championship game, then a playoff?
Well, there's a number of ways you can do it. I've thought of several that I would be satisfied with, but they do need to play the same number of conference games. And there needs to be a system in play that even within the conference, that the schedules are equitable. So as you well know, again, the Big 12 does it the best way. And it's not like they're so smart. They fell into that schedule. They fell into that schedule because teams left the conference and they had to play everybody. So they weren't such geniuses that they thought, okay, we're going to have the purest schedule that's going to determine a championship. They fell into that. But you just need to have equality in the scheduling as best you can. So if not everyone plays everyone, then there is always going to be inequality, because we can't predict who's going to get better and who's going to get worse. You can only base it on the previous year's schedule, the previous year's results. We can't predict who's going to get better and who's going to get worse. So there's always going to be a team with a tougher schedule, a team with a less tough schedule, as long as you're not playing everybody, because you can't predict the future. But at least by determining it based on the previous season's results, you can come as close as possible to giving everybody an equitable schedule. And you brought up the rivalries in the SEC. So I want to respect those rivalries. I think they make sense. And that's one of the great things about college football is tradition. Keep the Alabama-Tennessee game. Keep the Georgia-Florida or the Georgia-Auburn matchup. Keep the LSU-Florida game. Those I consider rivalries. Kentucky and Mississippi State's not a rival. They just matched up those two teams because they had nowhere to go. South Carolina and Texas A&M is not a rivalry to play every year, but they play every year because they just have to match up the other teams. Why match up the other teams? Just protect those 3 rivalries. And that would give you so much more flexibility in scheduling. Ole Miss and Vandy don't have to play every year. Those are stupid. They don't make any sense. They're not necessary. So discard those, and that frees up scheduling flexibility to do exactly what I'm proposing.
Okay, so Mr. Rogers, you are the commissioner of NCAA football, and what you're going to ask is for each conference commissioner, instead of doing how they've been conducting business for the past million years when it comes to scheduling, you would like for them to formulate their schedules at the conclusion of each year, instead of how they've been doing it, as you stated earlier, instead of forecasting, they will formulate their schedules at the end of each year.
Absolutely. The NFL can do it. Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, they all have, and in many ways, their schedules and traveling's more, especially Major League Baseball. My goodness, 162 games, 30 teams. You talk about scheduling and travel that they can schedule during an off season. Everybody else can do it. Why can't college football do it? It's not difficult.
Well, because Mr. Rogers, what you are once again doing, you're thinking with a rational mind. And in some cases, although these gentlemen are millionaires, and maybe in some cases billionaires, they don't think with a rational mind. So
well, imagine this, Kevin. Imagine this. Do you like the NFL?
Not as much as I used to. And
okay.
That's another story for another time.
Whether you like the NFL or not, you know that they release the schedule on whatever date that is, sometime in May, and people make a big deal about it. And I just don't get it.
True.
Like the NFL Network, of course, that's what they do. But ESPN, all the networks online, the NFL schedule releases Thursday. The NFL, they do specials and they do all these shows. I used to be heavily involved in the NFL as well. I used to be an NFL junkie. I'm not anymore. I still like to watch the games, but that's all I do. I don't read. I don't look it up. I don't look at the stats. I just watch the games and enjoy the games. But I understand the scheduling system in the NFL. And if anybody else does, it's no big surprise what the NFL schedule is going to look like. You can give me any team and I can tell you off the top of my head, the 13 out of the 16 games on their schedule next year, because the schedule's a formula. So why is it such a big deal to release the schedule in the NFL? But they make it a big deal, and it brings a lot of attention to the NFL. Imagine in college football, if the scheduling was done during the off season, that let's say May 1st was the schedule release in college football, how much attention that would give to college football, how much fans would get excited to see the schedule release every year. Boom, it all gets released on the same day. Here's the college football schedule for 2021 on May 1st. Everyone would get excited. It would bring attention to the game. It would be good for college football.
That's a great marketing point, but let me ask you this, Mark, and that is when it comes to major sports in North America, would it be safe to say, okay, NFL is still number one, a close second, college football, then say third, NBA, fourth, maybe MLB, then everyone else in a lump? Okay, I'm listening.
I think that's fair. I don't like it to be fair. I don't like the truth because I'm a baseball fan or used to be. But yeah, that's accurate.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is, okay, what you're proposing, I mean, hey, I'm on board for it because, hey, I'm not a weather person, but I believe in forecasting when it comes to my schedule. So it'd be a matter of, okay, if I know that Alabama's going to play, like for instance this year, I know Alabama's going to play, okay, Miami neutral site in Georgia. Then they're going to play Florida and Gainesville on X amount of days. Then, hey, I'll say, okay, I'll do all my honeydews as far as on all those other days. And, hey, when it comes to that particular day, I say, hey, I'm going to, put some time aside to check out I'm going to put time aside to check out all the games. But specifically when it comes to, say, a LSU or Florida, those, quote, prime games. But the thing is, I would ask you, Mark, do you feel, if you had to break it down by percentage as far as, quote, college fans, what would be the percentage of college fans that would look at a forecasted college schedule the way that they look at a NFL schedule.
When you say a forecasted, you mean a formula?
Well, just like this, it's all a pump and circumstance to, okay, we're going to not debut, I can't find, as far as on February 14th, we're going to give you as far as the 2021-2022 NFL schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm waiting a week. I know that, okay, on X date, they're going to tell me as far as, hey, when my 49ers or when my Cowboys or when my Steelers are going to play. I mean, as far as when they're going to play, as far as those 16, 18, however many games there are. Would there be that same pomp and circumstance when it comes to what you're proposing with a NCAA schedule?
Well, absolutely. Think about it right now. When Clemson and Georgia sign a contract to play in 2028 and 2029, yeah, we talk about it a little bit, and that's 9 years from now. So there's a little talk, oh, it's kind of cool. Clemson and Georgia are going to get back together and play in 9 years. I'm just using that as an example. They're playing actually this year. But we've seen all sorts of crazy contracts that are signed for 12 and 13 years in advance. And those two fan bases are like, they don't know who's going to be on the field, how good those programs are going to be, who's even going to be coaching at that point. So it's nice to think, oh, yeah, Ohio State and Texas signed a series for 12 years from now. Okay, great. But what does that really mean? Whereas if the only thing you knew as a college football fan is that Mark and his committee, as the commissioner of college football and his committee, they have devised a formula that is going to be produce an equitable schedule, both in conference and out of conference for everyone. Meaning when you look at your team and you look at your rival, you'll be able to say, at least they put together a schedule where we play a schedule of teams that have the same composite record as everybody else in the conference from the year before. So we're not Alabama, and we've got to play Georgia and Florida out of division, and LSU gets to play Kentucky and Vanderbilt. No more of that.
Okay, Mark, now you stated this earlier, and the one thing we need to make everyone aware of is that all conferences aren't created equal. You stated, and I think I've stated it as far as friends ad nauseum, when it comes to your major conferences. Okay, it's SEC, it's Big Ten, and honestly, and not trying to, and which I guess by what I'm about to say, going to step on some toes, is all the others. Because there's only really, if you want to use the term big boy football is only being played in two conferences. And that is for the SEC and the Big Ten. When it comes to the SEC, and I think you may be aware of it, Mr. Rogers, that, hey, you have some people that arrange their weddings around the SEC scheduling. You have some, I know in one case as far as at University of Tennessee, where you had a father that didn't attend his daughter's wedding because it was on the same weekend of Alabama, Tennessee. So in some parts of the country, as the country people would say, football is religion. And so that being the case, if all conferences were created equal, that's one thing. But I think you're going to still have some bones of contention when it comes to this because all conferences are created equal.
I understand your point, Kevin. Absolutely. Your point is valid. We know that there are different levels of play in different conferences. The only way you could correct that is to completely mishmash it all over the place and say, oh, okay, we're going to take Washington State and move them to the SEC, and we're going to take Georgia out and move them to the Pac-12. That would be the only way you can correct that. And that's obviously insane. And people in the Pac-12 don't want to have Georgia there. And, the travel would be ridiculous. And you break up all the rivalries and you completely ruin the sport just to make it equal. And then it would only be equal for a few years. And then you'd have to reorganize it again to say, oh, well, these programs got a lot better and these programs declined. And so we got to reorganize it again. That's always going to be the case. If you look at go through the NFL, go through any sport, you're going to see, oh, that division's better than that division's better than that division. They still organize a schedule. Actually, the scheduling helps solve that. Because first of all, if you're just talking about the SEC or talking about any given conference, the games within the conference schedule is only to determine who is going to win the conference. I've got a whole other plan, and believe me, Kevin, I've worked all this out, so the math works. I've developed a whole schedule, built it, that's equitable. So if Alabama, for example, has to play Tennessee, and Tennessee went 3-5 in the SEC, well, we match up another team in the SEC East that went 5-3, and we give Alabama a composite 500 schedule against the other division. So that's part of it, just to give you a taste of it. Now, the way we address non-conference scheduling is it's ridiculous that USC would have played. Now, this is great for the sport to watch games, but USC scheduled Alabama and Notre Dame this year. That's who they would have played non-conference in 2020. And they do those kind of things on a regular basis. USC will go out there. And so USC is doing that. At the same time, Baylor hasn't played a ranked team out of conference since 1995. Think about that. Baylor has not played a ranked team out of the Big 12 in 25 years because they always play Rice, Sam Houston State, UTEP, and whoever. Baylor never plays. And I'm just picking on Baylor. I could pick on Kansas. I could pick on all sorts of schools that don't play anyone. Well, that's ridiculous. We should play an equitable non-conference schedule as well, because Baylor's been good in the past. They were good 2 years ago and almost won the Big 12 and were considered a playoff contender. We could be in a situation where USC's winning the Pac-12 with one loss and Baylor's winning the Big 12 with one loss. USC played Alabama and Notre Dame non-conference, and Baylor played a bunch of Rice and UTEP schools. No, we take the scheduling out of the hands of the schools. We put it in the hands of a metric system that's monitored by a committee, so everyone has an equitable out-of-conference schedule too.
Well, your plan is solid. I just need to ask one question, and that would be in regards to across the board. How would a 10+1 sound? And that would be, say, for instance, I know in the future Alabama will play, I think, a home and home with Wisconsin, and also a home and home with Texas. So how would a conference-only schedule across the board for everyone, 10+1, and then as far as that one game being one, quote, name school? Now, my question is, speaking for just a follow-up, and that is, would this by chance be the demise of the little man? And I would even go to the part of saying Ant-Man or Adam when it comes to the very, very small schools being able to play those guarantee games as far as the future.
So you bring up a good point, because it's one thing for us to sit here and jot down a schedule on paper and say this is the way it should be done, but there are real lives and situations out there that are affected. And one are the Citadels of the world that depend on getting their $1 million paycheck from Clemson to help continue to fund their football program. So my proposal would be that you play 3 non-conference games, and my system committee, we schedule 2 of them, and then the individual schools can go out and play the FCS team or the group of 5 team that they can help or want to schedule to fill out the rest of the schedule. And really, when we're talking about choosing teams for a playoff, that game's going to be inconsequential anyway, because if you're losing to Citadel or North Dakota State or whomever, then you're not a playoff contender anyway. So go play that game, and that will round out and fill out your non-conference schedule.
Okay, so once again, Mark, everyone is eating at the same table. So okay. Every base is covered as far as for the little man, the big man, and then as far as when it comes to those guarantee games, which we know that the guarantee game serves a twofold purpose. One is to assist in you, as far as assist those schools that, hey, as we know, regardless of whatever the size of your institution is, football is the cash cow when it comes to every program. But then also when it comes to those, quote, name schools, it's going to give them the opportunity that they've only been, that they haven't been able to fulfill only once in the history of football this past year. And that as far as your second and third string quarterback being able to play. Because that's what hurt as far as depth, as far as your backups not being able to play. Because I don't think anyone's backups were able to play as far as this past season.
True. All right, Kevin. Anything else?
Well, briefly, just wanted to piggyback as far as something we spoke about, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. And that is when I was stating as far as my top four on yesterday regarding Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Georgia. I would say as far as not that far on the outside looking in would be Ohio State, and simply because of number one with the bullet, and that is as far as recruiting. Because I think when it's all said and done, Mark, you know, although we've been in some respects when it comes to the college football season of 2020/2021, the blessing was that for all the warts, we were blessed to be able to get through it. And that was really my biggest concern, Mark, was that I was on pins and needles when it came to, I was reluctant for us to go through with it because I've seen as far as all the hurt, harm, and even death, you know, as far as this pandemic has caused. But when we were able to get through it, as far as with the culmination on Monday evening, I took a sigh of relief. But then I look at as far as the future when it comes to college football, and I think that the deciding factor for those aforementioned institutions is going to be the recruiting classes of 20 and 21, because you're not going to be able to, with as far as the classes of 22 as well as the classes of 23, I don't know whether you're going to be able to truly evaluate those classes because of, you know, hey, we have all these different camps, like the Mark Rogers camp and the fly-by-night camps, as far as where, you know, young men supposed to go and show their wares maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and those are where you get, quote, these, if they make any sense, stars. And I think that as far as if you did a great job as far as recruiting in the 20 class as well as this 21 class, these are going to be your, as far as you really earning your money, if you did what you had to do for the previous class as well as this coming up class, that's going to decide as far as whether you're going to win a national championship. Really, I would even go as far as saying, Mark, the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's a great point you make. And to turn it to the other side, the side of the athlete, I posted 2 videos yesterday on 2 top recruits who have yet to sign. And when I looked at their commitment list or their interest list, they had no visits. They weren't able to visit any campuses. And that's too bad that these individuals have to make decisions without being able to get on campus and visit these coaches and visit the campus firsthand.
Yes, sir. Because I look at it, and as you're quite aware of ad nauseum, hey, you know, Crimson Tide, as far as I'm concerned, but of the 26 kids that have committed, excuse me, rephrase that, the 26 young men that have committed, of those 26, 13 are early enrollees. Some came in, some got to Tuscaloosa as late as, if I'm not mistaken, this past Monday, Tuesday. But then of those 26, of those 13, I'm thinking only maybe 1 or 2 of those 13 that are early enrollees. And of those 26, I would be hard pressed to say 8 or 9 that had to do, not had to do, but as far as had the due diligence as far as to, on their own dime, you know, campus visit. I know that Tuscaloosa's off the beaten path, but as far as the commitment that you're going to make for the next 3 to 4 years, because I know in some cases, and you're probably already aware of this, Mark, that, you know, some young men on their own dime went to Tuscaloosa, whether it was to these various, like for instance, I think they had a unofficial visit as far as Oklahoma, where it was just the signees, as well as LSU, as well as Georgia. So.
Yeah, I should have clarified that, Kevin. That's a good point. So official visits, there were no opportunities for official visits, but yes, on a number of occasions, players had the resources to be able to on their own dime go visit campus, but couldn't have the same interaction and couldn't have the same experience as they typically would, but at least they could go to campus. Yes.
And then along those lines, Mark, I mean, that's why the guys get paid the big bucks. You know, and some institutions say, okay, we know that Mark Rogers is going to be at Prime University for the next 4 or 6 years. And, hey, I've developed a relationship, developed a rapport with you. I have to sell you as far as Prime University. Now, the thing is, on the other hand, when it comes to some coaches, they can sell you Prime University, but then, as in the case with the University of Alabama, out of 10 coaches, you have 4 that are going to Texas. Then you have another, as far as of the 20 analysts, you have maybe half of those that are going on to 4-year institutions, whether it's as a head coach or whether it's going to the NFL as far as an assistant, or whether it's going to, quote, one of those, I can't think, lower level D1 schools as a head or assistant coach. So that is, I think that's going to be the other thing that maybe over the next 2 years that might be a positive / negative, if that makes any sense, that you're going to have some young men, because of making a sight unseen commitment, that when things may not go their way this season, that the transfer portal may be at all-time highs for us the 21-22 season.
Sure. All right, Kevin, thank you so much for the call. I'm going to get to some of these other calls.
Thank you very much. Take care, Mark.
You too, Kevin. All right. Apologize for that. That was a lengthy call, but a good one. 38 minutes. Wow. I am so good to you people. All right. It was a good conversation. So I'm not complaining at all, but I need to monitor those a little bit better. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Reagan.
Hey, Reagan. What's going on?
Not much, but so I'm gonna start off today with saying, asking you about your thoughts on an 18 college football playoff, and I'd agree with it because it would give teams like Cincinnati a chance. Of course, we saw them play good with Georgia, almost get the win, and then of course, as a fan, it would bring us more college football games. So, what are your thoughts on an 18 college football playoff?
Okay, if there was no considerations to injuries, no considerations to school, no considerations to anything, and all that mattered was football and us watching football, and sometimes I think we get caught up a little bit too much in what do we want and not thinking about the athletes themselves, not thinking about schedules, not thinking about school. So I would love to see a 16-team playoff, but I think that would be a little bit tough to take on. So let's go to an 18 playoff. And the reason I am an advocate for 8 is because we've got 5 conferences. We've got 5 major conferences, and we only have 4 spots. So it was doomed to fail from the beginning. And that was certainly my prediction. And that's why we've got controversy every year. Now, the advocates of a 14 playoff that argue against an 18 playoff often say, well, then team number 9 and team number 10 are going to complain, just like team number 4 and team number 5 and team number 6 complain about a 14 playoff now. No, they won't, or they won't have a legitimate argument for one simple reason. There is always a path to the playoff in an 18 playoff for the 5 major conferences, and that's by winning your conference. So you've got no excuse. Win your conference, you get an automatic berth to the playoff. If you can't win your conference, well, then if you're one of the best teams in the country, the very best teams that did not make a playoff or did not win the conference championship, then you will be selected to the playoff. But every conference is going to have the opportunity to be represented. So I'm going to produce a video here in the next few weeks that is going to unveil how I would select the 18 playoff. But there's basically 2 ways to do it in my mind. One is you have to make a decision about the group of 5. You have to make a clear decision. Right now, they are teased and patronized and told that they're part of the process, but they're really not part of the process. I posted a video the other day where I went through what an 8-team playoff would have looked like for the last 7 years during the college football playoff era. And one of those two models included the selection committee rankings. And even the year that UCF finished the regular season 12-0, they were only ranked 12th in the rankings. So the group of five is not being considered. So either we need to be clear cut to say, we are not including you. Go play your own playoff if that's what you want to do. Do whatever you want to do, but you are not being included in this playoff system. Or we are formally including you in the playoff, not this vague, we're considering you, you're in the rankings, you're under consideration, but really you're not. There needs to be a determination. Somebody needs to be strong enough, have enough guts, enough authority, enough power to make a decision to say either you're included or you're not included. Not this vague, you're kind of considered, maybe. So that's the first determination that needs to be made. And then beyond that, either we've got an 18 playoff where we have 5 conference champions and 3 wild cards from the Power 5, or we have 5 conference champions, 2 wild cards from the Power 5, and the best group of 5. And the way I would determine the wild cards, and I'll be more specific about this when I produce the video, would be by record, strength of schedule, and I would include metrics of strength of record, strength of schedule, all of that included to select the very best of the teams that did not win their conference.
Mm-hmm. Do you see a 18 college football playoff in our future or no?
Absolutely. I do. It may take a few more years than most people want it to take, but it will happen.
Yeah, I think it will happen sooner than later. But on to the next thing. How do you think Washington State will perform next year with Jarrett Garantano from Tennessee transferring over there?
So Washington State obviously has a first-year head coach in Nick Rolovich from Hawaii, who implemented a much different offense than what Mike Leach had there. So Washington State football, to me, is kind of nondescript. You know, had Jarrett Garantano left Tennessee to go to Washington State with Mike Leach, then I would know exactly how he was going to be handled and in what type of offense he was going to be implemented. Rolovich is more of a spread formation, power run guy. So that's probably going to fit Garantano's skill set. I think he's a capable quarterback to some degree. I don't think he has exceptional skills. I think he's okay. For most of his career, it's kind of strange that for most of his career at Tennessee, their offensive line was probably the worst position on the field. But they recruited very well. Give Jeremy Pruitt some credit here. They recruited extremely well along the offensive front, and they were much better this past season and a half at the offensive line position. So the Tennessee football that I watched, I saw Jarrett Garantano running for his life and flat on his back most of the time during the early portion of his career. And this past season, I think most of his problems were his own. I think Jarrett Garantano's a pretty marginal average quarterback in Power 5 football. I think he's probably one of the 30 or 40 best quarterbacks in the nation, something in that range. So he's going to do okay at Washington State. I don't expect him to light it up or be one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, though.
Yeah, we've seen Washington State. I mean, they were good a couple of years ago, but just kind of had a downfall.
Well, yeah, you have to kind of forget anything that's happened at Washington State just because Mike Leach is gone, and with him goes the program, and it's just a different program. And not to say that Nick Rolovich can't do well, But Jared Garantano is going to face weaker defenses in the Pac-12, but he's also going to be surrounded by less talent at Washington State than what he was at Tennessee.
Yeah, he. I want to say he'd be playing less talent too, but I mean, I don't know.
Oh, he will be.
He could be. The Pac-12 is definitely not. Doesn't have any teams like the SEC schools, Alabama, Florida.
Sure, he's going to be
Georgia,
playing against less talent, but he's also going to be playing with less talent.
Yeah, I think he'll perform better, but I don't think he'll be like a great quarterback at Washington State. But there's some big names in the transfer portal. N'Kosi Perry entered his name, and I'm going to talk about Tate Martell some. What do you think about his talent? Because he's never really got to show his talent on the football field. Do you think that he will be a good quarterback if he gets the chance? Or do you think he should enter the transfer portal or what?
Well, we've all seen very little of Tate Martell. We saw him play about a couple of quarters against bad teams at Ohio State. And then we saw him go to Miami. And I'm thinking back to the Louisiana Tech bowl game in which he got a couple snaps. And just to watch the guy throw the ball. And again, I'm saying this on a very small sample size, so I don't want to make this an overall evaluation because us as college football fans haven't watched Tate Martell play extended time. The coaches at Ohio State and coaches at Miami could tell us a lot more about Tate Martell and why he was never given serious consideration, especially at Miami, to be the starting quarterback, even when they were struggling with the likes of N'Kosi Perry and Jaron Williams. I don't think that Tate Martell is a poor man's Tim Tebow that's right-handed. He's fast. Well, he's faster than Tim Tebow, but I'm just likening him as a runner. He's a run-first quarterback that's extremely fast. He's an elite athlete as a runner or as the potential to be. When I see the guy throw the ball, I don't think he's a Power 5 quarterback as a thrower. I don't get why he was a 5-star. I don't understand it.
Yeah, he did really good in college, but I mean not college, high school. But he also was surrounded by a group of good football players in high school too. But yeah, that's all I have today. Thank you.
Good stuff.
All right, thank you. Goodbye.
All right, folks. How are we looking here? When my screen doesn't adjust, I've got issues. There we go. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Well, I find it interesting that you are moving your hours up now. It's more like during the day as compared to the evening hours for the call-in show, which I like, to be honest with you.
Well, I've got to figure that out. I will hope to get on a schedule where people can know where to find me soon.
No, it's okay. I enjoy it. I wanted to ask you a question. You were talking about the schedule with the gentleman earlier about, and we talked about this before as far as moving it around and putting it, basically basing it on the previous year, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and having a committee. Just a two-part question. Have you ever heard the reasoning from the athletic directors why these schedules have to be put 10 years in advance or whatever the case might be? And second part, what would your committee look like, Mark? Would it be something similar to the playoff committee that's already in place, or how different would it be, or what would comprise that committee?
Well, I've never given that a whole lot of thought, but I would think some reasonable college football minds could get together. And then we could also have an element in the committee that would be very conference centric, because they would understand the the environments, the region, that there may be some nuances that they could provide in the thought process of who should be matched up against whom that would provide a value.
What do you think about, like, maybe former coaches, something like that, former athletic directors, people that are at least close to the sport or follow the sport?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. But again, they would be bound by such tight restrictions and such a tight system that they wouldn't be making a whole lot of decisions, but they would be the fallback for when the system said, well, you can either put Iowa in that spot or Minnesota or Illinois. Who should you put in? That they
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And just that they would be able to provide some direction, that they would give. I think that you can put together systems and metrics, and I think that that should be the basis and the core of what we do, but that you can provide some wisdom and direction and some insight and context to everything. Therefore, that's where you lean on people.
Okay. Now, because the one thing that I was going to say is, you know, with the playoff committee, they say that a lot of these athletic directors and former coaches also have their own biases. You know, so that's also the one thing about putting these committees together,
Sure.
Mark, that always adds the degree of difficulty.
But that's why you start with a system, and because right now you're absolutely right. People have biases and they have agendas.
Right.
But if the system restricts them so much to, you have to hit this standard, everybody has to have a 500 composite schedule. Well,
right.
that boxes them into just making a few decisions.
One other thing, by the way, to the first part of my question, any idea on why the athletic directors do what they do when they or have to do what they do when they?
It's funny that you say that, because as soon as you asked that, I thought, man, back in my past, how many times have I been in conversations or been in news conferences where that was brought up? And it wasn't like 50 times, but it was probably 5 or 10. And I always dismissed, you know, it's been so long ago. Plus, I just never bought the answer that I couldn't even tell you what. The only thing that I remember being talked about extensively was travel. We have to allow people the time to plan to travel.
We have to allow 10 years for travel.
10, yeah, I'm booking those flights for 2030 for my vacation. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure those athletic directors have a way of kind of evading that question and tying it to things that probably make no sense. So that was always the obvious thing is, and I'm sure they've been asked that question before, why do these games have to be scheduled so far in advance, but never exactly heard their answer on that point. I didn't get a chance to yesterday to talk. You were talking a little bit about 2021 and kind of projecting towards 2021.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to get into that just a little bit. I did. By the way, on the Ohio State front, I will say this: just a few things, and then I want to mention a couple teams that I think to watch out for next year. I do think that the Buckeyes, I don't want to say it's almost like a 2016 type season to where, obviously, they had the mass exodus off of the 2015 team where they lost a lot of players to the NFL. I mean, they're going to lose a fair amount of guys, but I do think they're going to be strong in some areas. I don't know if you'd heard their one offensive tackle, Fair Mumford, is coming back next year. So that could give them 3 starters back on their offensive line, which I think could still be a fairly strong group. And they do have a couple of younger guys they played this year. Plus, I expect their wide receiver core to still be really strong. They're going to get back Garrett Wilson. Some of those younger receivers, they had one of the best receiving recruiting classes in the country. I believe the best receiving recruiting class in the country coming in this year. So I think some of those receivers, Jackson Smith, Julian Fleming, some of those guys will get a chance to shine next year. I had also possibly heard that Trey Sermon may come back next year at running back. I don't think that's going to be the case, but even if it isn't the case, They do have the 5-star running back Travion Henderson coming in. So I'm excited to see what he can do. The real question for them is going to be quarterback, obviously. Now, you had posted something about the possibility of Justin Fields coming back. Mark, bottom line, do you even think that's realistic?
No. I just think
No.
he's it's the biggest decision of his life, other than choosing what school he went to, and this is even more, they're higher stakes. So I just think he's taking a little bit of time just to make sure. But no, the how can you increase your draft stock anymore? Sure, he could be the number one player taken in the 22 draft, but does that really matter? And why go out there and risk more injury and all of that? He can be developed somewhere, even if he's not the starting quarterback with the New York Jets in 21. Maybe they sit him down for half a season or a full season or whatever it is. If he's not able to read defenses, if that's the knock against him, not able to read defenses to that degree, they'll work with him. But yeah, he's just too high of a prospect for him to pass that up. Can't imagine it.
I can't either. Although I will say this, Mark, and going to be rooting for my Browns today. I have to throw that out there. But Baker Mayfield was a quarterback, played 3 years worth of college. I think certainly benefited from it. I don't think there's any doubt that Trevor Lawrence, as great as Trevor Lawrence is, benefited from playing 3 years worth of college. I know that there's been quarterbacks, some in the past, that have come back and maybe their stock has been hurt. But, I just think, and Joel Klatt talked about this, our old buddy Joel Klatt, that you never hurt yourself, I think, by playing more games, getting more reps in college. Usually, more often than not, you help yourself rather than hurt yourself. Wouldn't you say that?
Sure. If we could take injury out of the equation, if it was just all about you play, you get reps, you play with excellent players at a place like Ohio State, you get coached by an excellent coach in Ryan Day and others, sure, the development only prepares you better, because we have certainly seen players, and specifically quarterbacks, prematurely enter the NFL and fail. Now, we'll never know whether they could have succeeded had they put more time in at the collegiate level. I think some of them would have failed regardless, and others would have benefited and maybe had a much different NFL career. So if you can eliminate the possibility of injury, yes, Justin Fields I can't imagine he's going to come out and throw 18 interceptions next year at Ohio State, and his draft status is going to plummet to the second round. He would only better prepare himself for the NFL. But his ceiling's only he's almost reached his ceiling from a draft status, so he can only be the number one player, as opposed to being the number 2 or the number 4 or whatever he's going to be this year. I would hope the number 2. I would think that the Jets are going to draft him. I would. But
from what I've heard, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Matt Barkley comes to mind as a guy that suffered, even though I didn't think that his final year at USC was that detrimental, or shouldn't have been, to his draft status. He was arguably the number 1 player, and then he plummeted.
Well, whose draft status they say suffered at USC for coming back was Leinart, and I don't think that made sense. Because he was supposed to be, I think, taken even higher after they had destroyed Oklahoma in 2004 than he would have been after they lost the heartbreaker to Texas, after 2005.
Yeah, Leinart was drafted, if I remember correctly, 13th in the first round. That's the number that comes to mind.
Yeah, he went to the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Which, should have been an ideal situation, considering you had Anquan Bolden and Larry Fitzgerald to throw the ball to, So, but it just showed that didn't necessarily work out for him. But, I mean, back to the point, though, as far as what I was saying, I think Fields will go just because of his draft stock. He's got to strike while the iron's hot. And, it'll be interesting to see. Now, I will say this, Mark. I do follow the program fairly closely. I've heard rumors that the Jets are still have hopes for Sam Darnold. So I don't know if that means anything, but I don't know if that necessarily means the Jets might be going there. That would be interesting.
Sure. It's easy for me to sit here and say I take Justin Fields, but I'm not a professional scout. I don't have a scouting department. My job's not on the line. There's not a ton of money and reputation on the line for me just to say I'd take Justin Fields. And they have their evaluation of Sam Darnold. I think that most of his issues at that level have been based on supporting cast, and it's been difficult to evaluate him. He's been hurt. All those things. And certainly, you're not, when you draft an offensive lineman, you need a bunch of them. When you draft a quarterback, he's got to be the quarterback. So you're really pinning your future, not just on the importance of that position, but also just the way the game is played and organized on the field. He has to be the guy. So you need to make a decision, and you're obviously drafting that high for a reason. Therefore, you need a lot. You need other things. So if you botch the quarterback spot, then you missed out on, and we can all go back to whatever draft we want to and see, okay, they took a shot at a quarterback. They didn't take said cornerback, wide receiver, left tackle that they could have taken that turned out to be all pros.
Right. Well, what is it, Mark? I mean, usually if you're a quarterback that's going to be taken high, you're not going to go to the most talented roster, obviously, in the NFL to begin with. And usually the rationale is simple, is you draft the quarterback, and then hopefully you take the next couple of years to put the pieces around him, i.e. the line, the receivers, the backs, so on and so forth. So hopefully by year number 3, year number 4, you see some food on your plate. You start to see some productivity and start to think, okay, this is the quarterback we can win with. So, I mean, in an ideal world, that would be the way it would work out. But we don't live in an ideal world, needless to say, and a lot of times it doesn't. So, just real quick about their defense, it's going to be interesting to see how much improved they're going to be in the secondary. I still think their D-line can be very good. It would be interesting to see if they get both the defensive tackles back, Garrett and Togiai, next year, but I got a feeling those guys could be headed to the NFL, and they had really good years, so I wouldn't be surprised. But I think their defensive ends will be strong next year. Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith. I think Jack Sawyer is going to get a chance to come in and play the 5-star. So I think they're going to be good on defense. I think the secondary is just the question. They got to find corners that can play next year. So that's really going to be my question there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the rest of there.
Not necessarily. That all seems reasonable.
On to the teams to watch next year, just by the way. Just want to throw this out here real quick before I let you go, Mark. I think the team that's got to be ranked in the top 3 or 4 next year, I don't know. Did you say you already did a way too early top 20, top 25?
I did not.
Okay. Is that something that's in the works there, Mark?
Absolutely.
The team I have up there, I don't know how high you would put them. I'm thinking Oklahoma's going to be very good next year. Really good. I think they have to be the prohibitive favorite to win the Big 12, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, this is a football season. I think we could have said the same thing last year, the year before, the year before, the year before. I don't know when the last time we would have said that Oklahoma was not the prohibitive favorite to win the Big. I guess it would have been 2014. They are.
I said this year I thought Texas had a shot, Mark. I mean,
I think other teams, teams have had shots.
Texas to win the Big 12 this year, didn't you?
Well, with this crazy schedule release, when I released a few days ago my predictions versus what actually happened, and I was a bit confused, and I wasn't going to take the time. It wasn't worth my time to try to figure out what happened there. But obviously, there was supposed to be a college football season the first weekend of September, and then it was all delayed, and the different conferences played at different times. So originally, I picked Texas to go to the playoff, but when it came down to it, I looked at my Big 12 predictions that I released before the season started, that I released, the Wednesday or Thursday prior to the season starting. And I picked Oklahoma to win the Big 12, and I picked Texas second. I picked Oklahoma to go 8-2, which they did, and I picked Texas to go 7-3. So I did not eventually pick Texas to win the Big 12. But yes, at some time in the summer, I picked them to go to the playoff.
Okay. I was starting to wonder
You're right.
about that. Well, you also picked Kentucky too, Mark. So I can't be.
Well, let's be clear to the viewers listening to all this. I did not pick Kentucky to win the SEC or go to the playoff. Those are two things that I did pick Texas at one point to do. No, I did not pick Kentucky to win the SEC or go to the playoff.
You picked them to get to Atlanta.
Yes,
right. You picked them to win
I
that
did.
side of the SEC.
Absolutely.
Yep. Right.
Yeah, I could play the role. I could play the role, as I explained last night. I could play the role of Athlon, Street and Smiths, Lindy's, and give you this bland prediction, and where I never take a gamble on anything. And I've outlined how those publications miss it by not being able to really project anything. And I don't know if you know where I'm headed here, because I've explained this in the past. They basically take the previous year's results and basically just change them by a game in a few instances, and they're your predictions. They don't have any force. They haven't shown any foresight. They're great information publications, but in terms of their predictions, they have shown, as I reviewed about 3 straight years in these 3 publications, they have shown no foresight in being able to envision that a particular team or program is going to ascend or decline.
This is true. Well, Phil Steele, and you've had Phil.
I left him out.
I know before.
Yeah.
Okay. What, you left Phil out?
I said Athlon's, Lindy's, and Street and Smiths. I reviewed those 3.
Okay.
Phil Steele picked, I believe, Texas A&M to go to the playoff this year, if I remember correctly. I believe he did. I believe he told me that he was going to, or he did.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. I mean, you'd have 2 teams on the same side of the division. It almost happened anyway, right, Mark? And that was some foresight.
Yeah, that's why I'm exactly. Our friends over at SD1 Sports produced a video the other day, and I didn't look through it, but basically what he did was he took his predictions over the last, he went back to 2016 and took his playoff predictions and compared them to Klatz and Herb Street and Corso and I don't know who else, and basically made a comparison. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just take his information, because I don't even know where I would find those. I'll take his information, put them up against my predictions, and see who did better in predicting playoff teams. I'm going to be betting on, I don't even think my predictions have been that great over the last several years, but I'm going to bet on me.
Right. Well, I mean, like they said, if you go with Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, most years you usually feel pretty confident of getting at least 3 out of 4 right. Yeah. So, and then you Oklahoma has probably been the team that's been there, because Oklahoma's made the playoffs 4 or 5 times. So they've probably been the other program that you could always maybe put out there as the 4th program. And I'll give you one other team for next year, Mark. And I know I believe you picked them to win the national championship going into 2018, and I picked them as a playoff team that year. I thought they'd win the SEC. I'm thinking they may have got the quarterback. Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think Georgia next year is going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about Daniels, a quarterback. He looked a lot better as the season went along. They got back to running back. They got back White. I believe they've got Pickens back at wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they could be really good offensively next year. What are your thoughts?
Well, absolutely. They're loaded. And they had more returnees that could have opted for the NFL draft than they expected to have. So they had a lot of people that could have left for the NFL draft. Of course, they had their share of departures because of their talent, but they had several guys who were leaning NFL opt to come back. JT Daniels for a full, what we hope to be a full spring, summer workouts, August camp, all of that, I think should based on what I know of his work ethic, starting from the time that he stepped on campus at USC, should serve him greatly. I think they're in prime position. And you're refreshing my memory. Yes, I picked Georgia. That must have been in 2019 to win the national championship over Clemson.
2019.
So I'm good at
That's right.
I'm good at predicting the losers of the championship games. Apparently, I've picked at least the last two.
You called it 18 because you called Clemson to win it all. You did get that right.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go. I got to dig up these videos because I should keep track of that. I used to be really good at keeping track of all my predictions, and I've just fallen off the wagon the last few years. They're just scattered all over the place. But
yeah, I hear you. We kind of put these predictions out there. We end up forgetting about them for a while. But yeah, right now, I think both of those teams, if I had to predict right now, would be 2 of my 4 playoff teams next year.
Yeah,
Georgia and Oklahoma, pencil them in on the Mark Rogers predictions.
There it is.
For playoff teams.
All right, David.
Well, as always, a pleasure to talk college football with Mark Rogers. Go Browns, and have a good one, my friend.
All right, good stuff. All right. I am going through the live chat, and I'm probably about a half hour behind, I could imagine. And I'm seeing a lot of comments from people complaining about, and when I say complaining, I don't mean this in a bad way, but basically concerned about the length of the phone call. So I'm going to do better on the length of the phone calls. I give people way too much time. I understand that. To have a decent conversation, though. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hello, it's me, Roberto.
Hey, Roberto. How are you?
Good. Are you ready for the big explanation on why it should not expand yet?
I'm ready for a decent explanation. It doesn't have to be a big one. It's got to be a good one, though.
Well, I always say it's always going to be the top 3, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. But, the other programs are not that far behind. Georgia just needs to get a quarterback away from competing against Alabama. Michigan, same too. Penn State as well. And Texas just needs to get their offense straight up because I've been saying all the time to start Bijan Robinson and ran the ball. And in the West, you got USC and Oregon competing at it.
Yeah. You're basically giving me a reason to further confirm that we need an expanded playoff.
Well, the only way you're going to get the invitations to dethrone the top. That's dethrone the top players. Dethrone the top programs. Georgia has to beat Bama. Texas A&M got to beat Bama if you want to get invited to the top 4.
Are you telling us to expand the playoff or not expand the playoff? You're just telling us who's at the top and who needs to knock them off. I'm not understanding your point.
If you want to prove to be in the playoffs, you got to knock them off.
Sure, that you could say that about any sport. You could say that about a Monopoly tournament. Yes, we wait a minute. To expand, wait a minute. I'm trying to grasp this. I cannot get my head around the point of your call. So you don't want to expand the playoff, correct?
Yeah.
Do not want to expand the. Okay.
I said not yet.
Oh, you want teams to prove that they can knock off.
Yes.
The top teams. Okay, you don't think by expanding the playoffs that may serve as a vehicle for those teams to recruit better because they have a better chance of getting into the playoff to knock off those teams.
Recruit better and coach better. And the coach better, too.
Coach better?
I mean, yes. How could... Always bringing in top 10 recruits, and he still can't beat Ohio State, or let alone any top 10 teams on the road.
See, I think one of the problems we have in looking at this situation is that people respond too much to what happened last season. So typically, as we go year to year to year, is that as soon as the season's over, people say, well, this happened and that could have happened. So let's change the playoff to do this. And they're looking at 1 year. and saying this would fix this year. Well, you can't build a playoff based on that, number one. Number two, why are we building a playoff or making possible adjustments based on the configuration of the teams and the teams that are elite or not elite? A playoff system should just be put in place because it's fair and equitable and reasonable and it works, not because, well, we got these three teams that are so good that we need to do something, or we need to just keep it the same because they're going to play anyway. That doesn't seem too logical to me to build a playoff system. Like if Alabama proved to be, over the next 5 years, the best team in college football, hands down, let's say they won the next 5 national championship games by 50 points. Would we then say, let's break up the playoff, cancel the playoff, don't even have a playoff, and Alabama will win the SEC, and they've been the best, so we'll just award them the national championship? That's basically what people are saying by saying, let's not expand the playoff or do what's fair and equitable because these three teams are dominating the sport.
Well, I don't think that's exactly quite true. I mean, in 2019, I said, like, Penn State was just one win against us away from going to the Big Ten championship.
Well, we've got all sorts of examples of teams being one win away from going to a playoff. Utah could have been in the playoff last year. Baylor could have been in the playoff last year with one more win.
So was 2018 Michigan. So was 2017 Penn State. So yeah, it goes.
Well, I took it as literally one game. Michigan would have had to beat Ohio State and win a Big Ten championship game. They were actually 2 games away in those instances.
Okay, yeah.
Baylor and Utah lost conference championship games that would have sent them to the playoff.
I mean, honestly, in 2018, even like if they beat Ohio State, do you think Michigan wins against Western in 2018? I'm pretty sure they would win that.
I'm not showing complete confidence in Michigan beating anyone. I'm not completely confident that Michigan would have won the Big Ten championship. They probably would have, but I'm not making that as a foregone conclusion. So basically, we have a system right now where the Pac-12, and I understand nobody has respect for the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 hasn't done anything, but the Pac-12 has had no opportunity to do anything. So the Pac-12 has made the playoff twice. And it's not like the Pac-12 has lost these games 50-0. They had a team advance to the championship game, the national championship game, and they had another team play a respectable game against Alabama. I don't understand what the embarrassment is there, that we assume that the Pac-12 can't compete and they shouldn't be playing. Well, if they shouldn't be involved, then they should just not be involved. We should just exclude them, formally exclude them, say the Pac-12 is not good enough based on very little evidence, but we've determined the Pac-12 is not good enough. So you're not going to be in our playoff. You're not going to participate in our playoff, and we're going to exclude you.
I mean, they can turn it around in seasons. Every season's different.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how it should be viewed.
Well, I hope Oregon can step it up. Maybe if they want to get a clear shot at the playoffs, we have to beat us. I don't know where they're going to play us, in the neutral site or in the horseshoe, depending on what's going to happen after.
The ironic thing about the Pac-12 not going to the playoff is that these Pac-12 teams have generally not gone to the playoff. You know why? Because they're beating themselves. So the argument could be made that the conference is too good and beating itself. That's why these Pac-12 teams are not going to the playoff, which is another stupid, completely moronic element to this system, is that good conferences, sometimes this may be the case. It can either be because the conference is mediocre and it's beating itself, or it could be that there are good teams beating other good teams. is that you're eliminating conferences based on them beating themselves. That doesn't make any sense.
Is that what happened to the Big 12? They beat themselves, and Oklahoma was the top 2 loss team out of it.
Sure.
And then they go to the bowl games and go 5-0. But,
all right, Roberto. Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
all right, thank you.
All right. Appreciate everybody jumping on the line. We are dwindling down, I think, with about 45 on the line. So we appreciate it. Keep in mind that these call-in shows and our team-specific live streams throughout the week, Florida State, Miami, and Ohio State, are brought to you by you. So without individual contributions, without sponsorships, we won't have much to go on here soon. So just keep that in mind. And we would love to provide more call-in shows, and we would like to provide team-specific shows that people say that they want, but we will need individual contributions and sponsorships to do such. All right, appreciate it. Enjoy the football this afternoon or whatever else you're doing, and we will see you soon.